Greetings and welcome to the Home Slice. This is a standard intro. If you already know what's up with my 40mm Manila rope testing, the ANDE Rope test, then you can skip to this time listed on screen. This is where the actual edge test begins. If you haven't been here before, then you've caught me in the middle of a testing series where I'm taking Victorinox knives because they're simple steel that's mainly just steel. There's not a bunch of extra alloys and carbide things going on in them. And I'm testing what different sharpening stones do to them. I'm testing fine, medium, and coarse stones individually. Then I'm taking the best from those and I'm making what's called a dual grit edge. If you're new to the channel, a dual grit edge is where you sharpen one side coarse or medium and the other side of the edge you sharpen fine. It has some really interesting characteristics. Usually it creates an aggressive edge that lasts longer than it normally would with either coarse or fine, with some exceptions, which we're testing to find out. Anyway, my test consists of, I've got a little goofy rig that I slice through a 1 centimeter thick sisal rope, and it's on a 45-degree wedge. It's intended to transfer that force down, and then I measure how many kilograms of pressure it took to slice through the rope while holding the rope vertical. That's intended to take forward motion and quantify how much pressure it took to slice through. This gives you some rough idea of edge aggression. The next test is to cut through a 40mm thick Manila rope, and then I test on a Best machine tester to test how keen and nice the edge stayed. I do that until it's over 400 grams on the Best tester, checking with Microscope and checking to see when it loses shaving capability in between tests. After 3, I will hammer the edge into a pine piano leg, and that's just to see if any of the edges break on impact. There are certain sharpening methods I've found that create an edge that's not as robust to impact tasks, and I want to kind of weed those out because for a working edge, I want it to be reasonably durable. Anyway, that's what we're testing for today. In just a second, we'll skip right over to the test footage, and I will let you know what the finishing stone that we're actually testing was.
Just a note before we get started, some guys have asked for scaling, and this is a measuring tape in millimeters. And as I try to get that mark on the left-hand side centered, I find I can't quite get the mark on the right on screen. So my best guess is that fully zoomed in, as all these tests are, my microscope, the full screen shoots about 1.8 millimeters. Now I've put 36 hyphens on screen, which means each of those is roughly 50 microns. So I'll bring that back later in the videos for scale. Now some of this data that we've been discovering kind of correlates to my earlier test of the Spyderco Ultra-fine, which had high best numbers but went for 6 passes through the ANDE rope. We've got a pretty good aggression reading. So this edge has been formed with the Spyderco Ultra-fine on one side and the Norton Crystolon Coarse stone on the other side. This is because I got such good deburring, probably the best dual grit deburring as far as a coarse stone goes, off of the Norton Crystolon Coarse. And I wanted to apply that to the Spyderco Ultra-fine. I also didn't have a microscope when I tested the Ultra-fine, so I wasn't able to see whether we had deburring or edge rolling problems. I just know that the longevity was okay. I have to say in the microscope it's looking pretty flaky, and I'm a bit concerned that that's a lot of damaged metal. But the first pass, very, very aggressive and really good numbers on the Best, staying pretty fine and keen at that edge. We jump up to 370, which is a big jump, almost 100 grams jump, and so I'm a little bit concerned that we have experienced some edge bending there. I think I didn't have a lot of experience with a microscope when I filmed this. However, looking at it now, I can pretty clearly see that there is some bending going on at that edge, and that there were some unresolved pieces of damage. As I've said in a lot of videos, you could get rid of this through figuring out how to optimize your stropping, no problem. But I've just discovered that some stones actually do a lot of deburring in the dual grit process just by coming together as coarse and fine, and it really minimizes the amount of stropping that you have to do, which really minimizes work but also maximizes the aggression that you're left with. This edge doesn't look horrible in the microscope right now. Most of that flaky stuff has kind of broken off and it's settled out to a fairly nice edge. And I definitely think that going more than 3 passes on the ANDE rope with 2 different coarse stones really shows that the Spyderco Ultra-fine is a viable option for creating dual grit edges, and it leaves them really, really aggressive. Now we've got 3.6 kilos of slicing aggression, and if we take out the original number, that's 2.5 kilos of aggression lost. That's kind of middle of the road. Your really, really good ones are around the 1.5, 1.7 mark. Your really bad ones are up at 4, 5, 6 or more. As we head to the pine piano leg to give it a few bashes and see how the best responds to that, I think this is really key for this edge. Anytime you see some flakiness and damage in the edge, you really want to ensure with the best and the microscope that that edge is not going to fold over easily on impact. The best looks okay. The microscope's a bit of a different story. When you look at that edge, there's definitely some changing lighting in some spots and a bit of a concerning spot there and there. I think that I would say if you are going to use the Spyderco Ultra-fine for a dual grit edge, make sure that you do more than the 3 to 5 passes that I have done to deburr it and give it a little bit more stropping. I think if you remove a little bit more metal, you'll still retain some of that aggression, but you want to avoid these bending problems that are being revealed in the microscope here. We must have hit a really lively portion of edge with the best because the best didn't pick it up, but it's good to have the redundancy of doing multiple different kinds of tests. Honestly, in the overall scope of my testing, I'm relatively pleased with this edge. I probably wouldn't use it myself at this point just because those edges that come off the Cerax have lasted so long. But here at Pass 4, we're at 310 grams. That's an excellent number. And this is definitely a competitor. We make it through to Pass 5. Which is about 60% better than your average edge. Most of my edges have gone 3 passes through the ANDE rope. So this is a good edge. I think that what we've realized is that that softer stone, the Cerax, really cleans up the dual grit edges really well. And so I think I'm going to wrap up for the moment dual grit testing with different stones, although we may revisit it later as I get other stones and focus my effort more on different kinds of steel. So I'd like to take these dual grit edges where we've got the CBN or the Crystolon with the Suhiro Cerax stone that have gone so long. And I think I need to probe out, are there different steels that works well for, or is there a threshold where you get a certain amount of carbon and then you need all diamond? There's a lot of questions about now how do we translate this research about stones into applying the best stones to different kinds of steel. So I think that's where I'm going next, and we'll revisit the world of stones as needed. But thanks for sticking with me through this. This has been a really cool series.